Hello and welcome to Dice Pool. I'm Sean Nittner, host of this stream. Thank you so much for coming here. Dice Pool, which was funded last year through our crowdfunding efforts, is a series where we interview GMs and creators of the games we publish. And today we have an extra special stream because we are going to be talking to the creators of Monster of the Week, Hunter's Journal, and Slater's Survival Kit. We have a limited amount of time to talk to each of them, so we're going to be giving each question, generally speaking, two of the creators, and we're not taking questions from chat during this time because we have so much content to go through. So with that said, let's bring on all our panelists. Hello and welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
Let's go through real quick and just say our names and our pronouns and the first Monster of the Week thing we ever did. I'll start. I'm Sean. I use he, him pronouns, and my first Monster of the Week experience was playing first edition with my friends from high school. I was like, check out this game. I brought it back to them. I hadn't seen them in years. And like, we mostly played D&D together and played a few other non D&D games. And so I was bringing them this like wild PBT powered by the apocalypse game that blew all of our minds. Luke, how about yourself?
Hello, I'm Luke, also known online as Thriftland. My pronouns are he, him, they, them. Either one of those would work. And my first Monster of the Week experience was running a one-shot for, I believe, 5 or 6 people, based a little bit on Fate Stay Night mixed with Tournament of the Dragon from Hero System, with a few custom-made homebrewed rolls on top of playbooks. I over-design everything I do.
Nice. Michael, I'm going to skip over you just because I'm crafty like that. How about Marek? Can you?
So, my name is Marek. I use he, him pronouns. And my first encounter with Monster of the Week was agreeing to review it for a website I've worked for, having no idea what this game is, and then reading it for the review and like running to all the role-playing friends I've known, shouting, we have to play it, we have to play it, we have to play this. And I've run it a lot and played it a lot ever since.
I love it. And Michael, I skipped you. I normally will not do this, but it felt a little strange to have you in the middle answering this question. So why don't you yourself as well?
Cool. Yep. So I'm Michael Sands, he, him pronouns. And yeah, my first experience with Monster of the Week was when I was watching Supernatural and thinking, man, it would be cool if there was a game that felt like this.
It's about right. Yeah. I just watched all 16 seasons because I hadn't ever finished it. And there's a lot of that show, and I'm glad that there is a lot.
It has a number of high points and a number of less high points along the way, but still I love it.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly. I have a lot of love for it, with all its warts. But that actually raises our first question. What a wonderful segue, Michael. We know a lot of the sources of inspiration for Monster of the Week, Supernatural, Buffy, and similar Monster of the Week shows. How do you approach Monster of the Week as a product line now that there's 5 books in the series, not including the stretch goals, which is even more? And what's the philosophy behind the development of the current content or the continued content?
Yeah, well, what I think when we're looking at whether to produce a new supplement is it like expanding the options of what you can do with the game? Like, I don't want to have a game line where we're just putting stuff out for the sake of it. I want them to kind of add something new that you couldn't do before. And I think so far each of the supplements has done that with kind of Tome of Mysteries providing a bunch of adventures for people to use and a bunch of extra optional rules. Then the Codex of Worlds with its like team playbooks on one side and the how to customize the world much further away from the standard contemporary monster hunting thing. And then with the Hunter's Journal and Slayer's Survival Kit, which I'm sure we'll talk about more, also giving you lots of new options for what to do with the game and opening up areas that weren't there before.
Well, as the person who has to upload all of the playbook sheets in all the variations in all the different places, I appreciate you only making supplements, well, all of you only making when there's new concepts to be had, because there are a lot of playbooks, a lot of variations, especially with Codex of Worlds. It's really increased the number of possibilities. And speaking of which, since we're sort of, we've been talking about it, but we should say this particular stream is happening because the Hunter's Journal and the Slayer Survival Kit are both, the crowdfunding is complete, and most importantly, the coins and the dice, the last of the physical components, just arrived in our warehouses this morning. So the last of the shipments are going to be going out. So if you back this campaign, you should already have all the digital rewards. That's not true. The Roll20 is still in development. You should already have most of the digital rewards, and you'll be getting your physical rewards very soon. That's not a question. That's just an exciting news because of the serendipity of today. All right. So Luke and Marek, originally Hunter's Journal was pitched by both of you, and originally it was also just one book, and we expanded it because there's so much content. But this was your innovation, your initial creation. So starting with Marek, what inspired you to start working on the Hunter's Journal?
I started working on what became the Hunter's Journal right after we finished our work on the Codex of Worlds.
Of course.
And I really loved working on the Codex. I think we did a great job there, and I'm very, very happy that the Codex is live and that many people have played it. But what I realized was that both the Codex and Tome of Mysteries contained mostly what I call keeper-first material. So something which can be used by everyone, but basically, usually the keeper initiates using it in the game, either by choosing a mystery or by pitching the idea of playing in a different world to the players. And I really wanted to design something which would be player first instead, or hunter first in Monster of the Week nomenclature. So I started working on those hunter stories. So basically, mini mysteries / side plots for every single hunter type, because I wanted a campaign which basically works like a menu from which the players order things from the keeper, rather than something keeper prepares for the players.
Give me keeper, give them to me. Yeah.
Yeah, precisely. And I started working on it, and I started brainstorming it. And then I sent them to Michael, asking him if he thinks it might be enough for a new Monster of the Week supplement. And Michael was like, well, it's good, maybe not large enough for an entire supplement, but Marek, there is this Luke Green guy who, by a total coincidence, is working on very similar things, and I think you two should talk. And then, Luke, your turn.
So, a lot of the different pieces are inspired by like campaigns or conversations I've had, like where people were confused about how the game works or how to approach the gameplay, because it's a severe paradigm shift from a lot of like traditional gaming situations. So it takes a little bit of different to thinking about how to approach it from some people that are used to other ways of playing. But the other thing is like I had cases like in one of my second major series, I had person who was going from mundane to chosen and very much wanted a tool to fix things rather than a weapon to break things. And so as one of the reasons I started doing the extra options for the chosen that ended up in Hunter's Journal. And also like, hey, wait, doesn't Winona Earp have like a special gun? And stuff like that. And then also, I like stretching the box of what people assume a thing can do, which is like I wanted to say is like just because your playbook is mundane doesn't mean you're human. You can have somebody like Mavis from Transylvania Hotel Transylvania, who's a vampire but is essentially just a person.
I love that. I love that mundane is completely contextual. It just means mundane in the context of your powers, not in the context of
And was really kind of funny because I was doing advice for each of the playbooks about how to approach them, and they used to be a lot bigger because again I over design everything before, which is why editing is good. But I wanted to get in contact with the person who wrote Pararomantic because I wanted to make sure my take on it was okay. And I asked Sophia Glagas, and one of her first things was, "Is this something you want to publish with us, or is this going to be indie?" It was like, "Well, indie." And as soon as I sent that, I was like, "Wait, that's an option." And then Michael got me in touch with Marek, pretty much the same exact way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was where it came
Well,
from.
I'd got emails from both of them about this stuff. It seemed pretty natural.
Yeah, it's a very fruitful space to work in, because I think for every Monster of the Week campaign, there is a different take on either a playbook or a different take on the way a collection of playbooks would come together. And the team playbooks was a great way to handle that in Codex. I love that. It's probably one of my favorite pieces of tech, is giving the team sort of a cohesive nature. But even then, everyone's going to have different takes on it. And so having these tools for expanding each playbook and growing them, I'm not surprised multiple people had the idea and were working towards clearly Sophie needs to work on the next one, because she's been part of it since Tome of Mysteries as well. So she made it a mystery for that. Well, so once you got started and were connected, originally Hunter's Journal was just one book, and we eventually split it up into two books because we had too much content. It would physically be too big to fit in a single 6x9 book. So how did you go from, Marek, the state where you said, "Oh, I don't know if there's going to be enough content to be a supplement," to everything that became, a Hunter's Journal and Slayer Survival Kit all in one? How did that evolution grow? Michael, why don't we start with you, since you joined the team at the end?
Yeah. So once we started putting it together, I think like the fact that there was so much material was the first thing that struck me, and it became quite an issue of how to organize it. And then later, once we realized that like we can't fit this in one book, like which bits can we drop, which is most important, which is least important, and that was kind of a big part of the editing process. And I have to tell people, like, even the two books we've got, we still lost a lot of potential material that could have been in there.
Right.
Like that's still the condensed version of all the ideas.
We still need to make the 600-page director's cut version of each book.
I've got working files on everything from before they got edited.
Nice.
So that was how it was from my side. I don't know what Marek and Luke, how it felt for you.
Yeah, Marek, what was it like as the process continued?
First and foremost, it was quite strongly playtest led, and I was getting a better and better grasp of if my parts, so the hunter stories, really work by running campaigns with them. And I think I realized I've got what I wanted when I managed to run a quite healthy zero prep campaign with the hunter stories, because simply the players were bringing me the way they want to play their stories. I was combining them into cohesive narratives. I also used the mysteries I've been writing for the Codex stretch goals every now and then as connecting tissue.
Nice.
So nothing got wasted. And it was a really, really, really good experience. And also, I think that working on the journal has helped us all see what else can be done with Monster of the Week, and what maybe not blind spots, but where is some space for development. And first, I was really amazed by how good Luke is at treating monsters as heroes. I think that Hunter's Journal and Slayer Survival Kit gives you tons of tools for playing Inhuman, Outcast, and just different hunters. Nice. And it's all due to how great Luke understands such hunters, and I would love him to tell more about it. And also, I think we all understood how easily Monster of the Week can be geared to a more cyberpunk or sci-fi game, and we also did some developments in that direction so that you can easily play something near futuristic or just alternate history or alternate present with this supplement.
It sounds like a setting framework in the making, Marek. Oh no, more content.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how many hunter stories were you usually juggling? Did you have one per hunter in your group?
Yeah, I've had one per hunter in the group. However, I've had a lovely case in which the player has changed their hunters mid-campaign, and they have pitched a new hunter story for this hunter, and the new hunter was a mundane, and by the way, he was a mundane horseman of the apocalypse. So again, as Luke said, the mundanes don't have to be humans. And this mundane horseman of the apocalypse, Hunger, chose the Precious Heart story. So because obviously he was a mundane but also a powerful supernatural creature, some nefarious forces were going to rip his heart apart. And the fact that the new character, who was like pretty helpless in fact, was entering the story with this new character arc thanks to the Hunter story, made for a very smooth sailing into the climax of the campaign. And like it really felt like a new Hunter story was an important development, an important plot twist, and it just like raised the tension level in the campaign to the maximum.
That's brilliant. Yeah, Luke, what about you? How did it evolve? And Tom, our secret weapon in chat, just forwarded an idea, which is another thought, which is, was there anything that did get cut that you particularly loved or wish could have been kept in, or that you want to share with us? So I'm sending a 2 for your way, Luke.
Okay, so one of the things I was doing originally with the descriptions of the advice bit on the different playbooks was I was going to pull examples from pop culture, some a little bit more obscure, some a little bit off the normal and stuff like that, like Jinx from Arcane as a hex based off weird science with the Carnage temptation.
Nice.
And stuff like that. So that there was just not enough room for it. And so that got cut down. There was one of the stretch goals that we didn't get to reveal. That was another playbook that I might work on in the future, but I'll hold that. But
yeah, there was a couple of stretch goals that I was, I mean, the campaign was very successful. I'm delighted with it, but we had a lot more ideas of things to do that could have happened and might, like you said, still happen in another project. Who knows? Yeah.
As for the evolution thing, it was a lot of like, we sent out one of the first things like, well, there's not a lot of. We were wondering if you could do more sci-fi. I was like, yeah, I could do that. And also it's like, by the way, you don't have any team playbooks. Do you think do you have any of those? I was like, well, I would love to work with team playbooks, but I don't have the rules yet. And then the next thing you guys said, well, here they are. And I was like, okay.
I think one of my favorite things about gaming is that the barrier between professional and hobbyist is basically non-existent. And when somebody says, I'm excited about your game and I want to make content for it, the typical reaction is, awesome. Why don't you create that? That sounds really cool. And it's very, most of the time that just means somebody has something they have on their website to download, or they make an itch thing, but sometimes it means we get, books that come out of it. And I think that's just all because of the general nature, not just with an Evil Hat or for Michael, but just, I think so many game designers have just been like, yeah, I'm excited for other people to create stuff based on, being inspired by my game.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. Oh, do you mind if I say, I want to say a bit more on that is, because I mean, Monster of the Week came to be partly from the same attitude from the Bakers with me adapting Apocalypse World. And, that's kind of built into it from the beginning. And and also, like Sean says, there's no real difference between industry professionals and amateurs here. I mean, even with the level of success I've had, I still feel like I'm a hobbyist as well. I'm just enjoying games like everyone else.
Yeah.
Sorry, back to you, Luke.
Yeah, it was definitely a thing because like I was not expecting that the whole like, yeah, here, just have the stuff. It was like, I don't know why, in retrospect, why I wouldn't expect that, because it would make sense if we planned to work together to have all the materials necessary to move forward and have an up-to-date supplement. But yeah, it was an evolution of, hey, could you add more stuff to it? Sure, yeah, I can do that. It's gotten bigger again.
I mean, as someone who, like you said, likes to design a lot, I think that sounds like a fantastic cue or proposal. So, Monster of the Week started with one weird move that wasn't too different. Or maybe it was two weird moves, sorry, because there's big magic. But like Monster of the Week weird started not too dissimilar to Apocalypse World in that it was sort of like the weird move. It was sort of the catch-all weird move that kind of handled anything weird. And since then, weird moves have really, in Tome of Mysteries and on, weird moves have really grown and honestly gotten quite weird to like, I think they've stretched beyond what a lot of people would even imagine in the context of a monster hunting supernatural ability. And it's really, I think, in a lot of ways sort of become one of the cornerstones of Monster of the Week, is that your flavor of what is weird or what is magical or what is supernatural in your game can really shift depending on, are you playing with with psychic powers? Are you playing with magic? Are you blending them? So I'd love to know where the ideas behind and the origins, the evolution of how the weird move has grown from the sort of catch-all to now the many variations of weird moves out there.
Yep. I guess I should start with this one.
Yeah, sure.
So writing it originally with Use Magic and Big Magic, the idea there was to capture the kind of magic you see in Supernatural or Buffy, where in the moments of action dealing with some kind of problem, the hunters can quickly do a spell, maybe from a book, whatever, that does what they need to do. So kind of magic as a plot device more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very much that style of, you might find the spell, you read it, you do the thing. With Use Magic being kind of flexible compared to that, like it can do a bunch of things, but not necessarily very powerful. And the Big Magic being for the big ritual things, if you need to like stop the world exploding and that sort of thing.
Little stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah. And then as the game had been out for a while, I was kind of thinking about things like X-Files and Fringe, where it's a bit more weird science, a bit more like psychic powers and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Thinking, there's definitely Monster of the Week flavors where you don't want it to all be tomes and spell casting. So that's where that original set of alternative weird moves in the Tome of Mysteries came from, where they're like, okay, what if you want it to be more psychic flavored? What if you want it to be more weird science flavored in your world? And kind of just giving a palette of options for that. And that kind of fits into my philosophy for world building in Monster of the Week, which may seem a bit of a tangent, but I think it's relevant, which is that Monster of the Week presents like some defaults and a bunch of options with this just general understanding that it's kind of like the contemporary world with monsters and the supernatural, but like the details of all that stuff are up to you and your group.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to kind of customize the how magic works is a kind of crucial part of that, I think. And so that's my thinking on how all this stuff develops. I feel like now I should hand over to Luke to talk about the really weird moves that he's put into the new book. Because that's kind of taking everything.
You're thinking of a very specific one that I did specifically for.
Not just one. But yeah, I know which one you mean.
Yeah, that one is actually a reference to a fake campaign I ran about 10 years ago now that the Centipede host.
Yeah, I was going to say you better introduce the move.
Yeah. I think you got to tell us about it now, Luke.
Yeah.
People are going to be.
So
crazy.
I was doing a thing where all the characters were immortals, and we were going to go from like I can't remember which crusade it was, but that Middle East and Eastern Europe region, and then move from there to modern day slowly over time. But we got split up. It was by email, and real life got in the way. So a lot of things. But one of the characters was a demon, and they had a thing where they could enhance people. We give a permanent aspect, and I put in the thing, okay, but I'm going to say this ability is going to have a limit that when you enhance somebody, I also enhance them.
Nice.
And so the first time they used it, I was like, what can I do for a thing that was obviously disturbing, but also objectively useful? And I gave them the ability to erupt centipedes out of their body.
I mean, I think that fits both. You have to work on useful. It's definitely disturbing.
But
those. If you have a look at the move write up in the book, you'll see those centipedes are pretty handy.
Oh yeah,
and really, really disturbing.
Yeah, that was very much a specific. I need an example of working on a custom move that was for a specific person rather than a general use one.
Yep.
An idea I got from listening to the Storyteller Squad, because they have a very bespoke summoning thing based around tarot cards for one of the characters in there. And I had this one in the back pocket, so I worked with that. And I figured I've made it in one of the articles, I might as well include it in the weird moves. But other than that, a lot of the others are kind of going off of different specialties of use magic, or turning a concept that is a playbook into something weird. Like the tradecraft is very much like the sci-fi spy thing.
Yeah.
Where you have Hitman with the instinct being able to see through walls or whatever, and Batman's detective mode, that kind of stuff. And the medium also being like, because the spooky has the site where they can talk to ghosts, but we didn't have as much of the flavor of doing the ritual to call a spirit from beyond, like that type thing.
Right.
And I wanted weird moves that both had those flavors, but also worked well with the other things they did instead of replacing them. Going back to the thing about supplements, my criteria is it has, like, for a good supplement and a good weird move in this, it has to add some, it kind of macro to micro in that case. It has to add something substantial and useful to the gameplay and the experience, and not increase buy-in costs. So it can't like replace what came before. It has to add to it.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah. Sorry.
Two huge things you're saying there. One of them is that the weird move should not essentially become a replacement for something else that's already in the game, where you think like, well, why would I ever use one of the existing basic moves if this weird move is gonna always, offer me a better solution. And two, I love the specificity of summoning centipede, erupting centipedes rather, or other ideas, because I think that when other people are trying to make their own weird moves and they're trying to do their own hacks, super specificity is actually more useful than something that's really general. If you say, well, weird moves could do all of these general things, I don't think that actually stirs people's imagination. When you give them real specific examples, they can go like, I could do it with snakes, or whatever whatever their ideas are. So
in a way, the benevolence one is also that super specificity, and it's a reaction to me because I wanted one that this is the holy power that is entirely benevolent and comes through. But I hate that trope of light is good, dark is evil. So I wanted something called benevolence instead of holy light that could be whatever physical manifestation it is. It comes out, but it's still a holy thing. It is a super specific flavor, but yeah.
No, that's honestly, the more specific, the more people are going to run with it. So I think it's fantastic.
And please, Michael.
I was just going to say, I think.
Why don't we go with Michael? Because Marek, I'm going to ask you a question in a second, and we'll get.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say that I think people will find a good range of examples in the ones we've got there. The other one to I think pull out is there's a hacking one, and it's definitely like supernatural hacking where you can, it's not, as a weird move where you can do things that you wouldn't normally be able to do, and that's quite specific and quite neat one. So as well as things like medium that are a bit more traditional.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, Marek.
I think supernatural hacking is really important because all hacking done in any media is, if anyone's ever worked in IT, you're like, no, that's not how it's not.
Oh yeah, I've specifically said the weird move is this is hacking the way writers and script writers think it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Marek?
I have an observation that most Monster of the Week players want to read the other weird moves for their second character or a few sessions into the game. So like use magic is a nice natural first step. And then once you have experimented with it, or once you simply want something different, then you reach out for the other ones. And it also helps us build more flavors of weird in the game.
Yep.
And I think the stories Michael was inspired by for Monster of the Week contain both this general magic, like I know a bit about the occult, I can mumbo jumbo anything, and people with very, very precise powers. And I'm very glad that Monster of the Week can work with both options nowadays.
Yeah. I also think that the point about world building is really important because the options you choose for what word moves are going to exist in your, could exist, what are potentially available to players. That's one sort of soft version of world building. But the hard, the more acute version of world building is when a player actually takes it, because now it's actually it's not just a thing that could exist. It's a thing that really you develop the game around that, or you develop the game in accordance with that. So you just by picking these moves, they do world building all on their own, which is super, super cool because it's just a natural effect. No one's having to do work for it. It's just how the game will progress naturally. So Marek, earlier on when we were talking about the origin of Hunter's Journal, you had talked about specifically about something that was player facing or player first, and looking for things because Codex World and Tome of Mysteries are very keeper facing or keeper first. So what's your approach in making something that is something that a player or a hunter can grab out of the book and say, I want to do this, right? How do you approach making it so that it's accessible to the players?
I want to make sure that the games run using my materials will be a truly collaborative experience, that everyone will contribute something, not just to how the game turns out, but also to the assumptions. And I was already playing with this in Codex of Worlds, right? For example, my longest chapter in the Codex, Dreaming with the Gods, happens in a Renaissance setting, but what Renaissance really means for this world, as in what ancient technologies and traditions were rediscovered, is up to the players, not just to the keeper, but to every single player. And I think that basically I want everyone at the table to surprise each other. And I'm having most fun during those games when everyone is surprised. That's also why I can't really enjoy very heavily scripted or railroaded games, because then I feel that there is too little surprise for everyone and like the game doesn't seem alive. So I wanted to create something which won't necessarily give the players more power, but which will give them more narrative agency and which will allow them to specify what are they expecting of a game, but still invite the keeper to surprise them in some ways. And actually, I think that you could see those hunter stories I wrote for Hunter's Journal as a very, very specialistic palettes for every playbook, so that every hunter can tell the keeper which sorts of conflicts and drama baked into their playbook they want to focus on, and also what parts of the world around them they want to create. So basically, my approach is to let the players choose the stories they want to play in to the maximum extent possible, and create tools thanks to which we will all surprise each other at the table.
Yeah.
Which might be a good point to tell that when I'm playtesting any materials, whether scenarios or new games or tools like Hunter Stories, one of my main markers of a good playtest is if the finale surprises me. If I can tell beforehand how will the game end, then usually I'm not having fun.
Yeah. There's a real fine line to thread there, because I think you can get to a place. I've seen games where someone says, you see something scary, what is it? And the player's like, I don't know, you're the GM, man. Like, you tell me what I'm seeing. But when you flip it around and say, what are the kinds of content you want to see in this game? And here are some examples of how those can be structured. And here are some things to use as a pick list or as a guide. I think that really fires up that imagination in people. And it's, I don't know, I like to think of games that are not GM less, but are like GM full. Like, everybody is kind of putting on a little bit of the GM hat in the game, because they're contributing to the world larger than just around their character. It's the things that affect them as well.
Yes, totally. And it was very important for me in Hunter Stories that with Hunter Stories, keepers can surprise the players with the tools Monster of the Week is already giving them. So, for example, with a Hunter story, your player can specify what is their personal rival or the big bad guy of their side story. But still, the keeper has the whole menu of Monster of the Week options to choose from. The player doesn't choose the specifics of how will the villain attack them.
Right.
The keeper is totally free to, for example, decide that the personal villain of a single character is allying with the monster of a mystery they have chosen from the Tome of Mysteries or they have written themselves. So I think that there must be a certain back and forth so that everyone can surprise everyone. And yes, sometimes if the player is too much in control of everything, they can't really be surprised anymore. Yep. So Hunter Stories are very much about choosing what you know, choosing what you don't know, and inviting the keeper to surprise you about the facts you have chosen yourself. And when something you have chosen yourself can still surprise you, the surprise is usually even bigger.
Right. When the keeper makes some kind of connection that is utterly surprising in the moment, and then when you look back on it, you're like, well, of course that was it. Of course that makes sense, but it doesn't. It wasn't what you were expecting in the moment. That's such a delicious moment where you're like, yeah, I'm putting all these things together, but the contribution of everybody getting to add to that is the secret sauce that makes that so cool.
I'm tempted to call it the Secret Santa RPG method, as in at a game we all are trying to delightfully surprise each other.
Right. Yeah. What a wonderful. Well, and I think that ties very well into a part of the Monster of the Week and a part of the Powered by the Apocalypse and a part of Forged in the Dark and several other game systems philosophies of playing to find out, and essentially, like you said early on, of not having a railroad situation, because the worst part of a railroad, I think, is not when the players go off, when they break off and they do something unpredictable. The worst part of a railroad is when they follow exactly to it. You're like, well, you did the story I thought you were going to do, and there's no surprises, and it's kind of boring, and everybody has the exact outcome they all thought was going to happen. And at that point, you should probably be writing a novel. And even then, I think a lot of writers, a lot of novelists also like to be surprised. They like to interrogate their characters and think what might happen and think where that might go. So I think playing to find out is not a light choice. It's not a simple or easy thing always to do. But I think it's super important when we're playing these organic stories. So, Michael, when you first picked up the Apocalypse World and looked at the framework, and we're building Watch of the Week, what does that play to find out? What does that mean to you, and how does that affect your sort of gameplay philosophy?
Well, I actually, because when I first played Apocalypse World, I don't think I had keyed into how important that was right away. It was when I actually played it and saw the way that it kind of structures stories that it gelled for me. And that was basically the idea that the MC in Apocalypse World, or the Keeper of Monster Week, like, they do all their prep, but what they prepare is like what's happened up to the point we start, and what the plans are, what the different characters involved are going to do. So you've got a very strong grounding of what's happened and is what people are going to try and make happen, and then you let the players loose in it and be surprised. As Marek was saying, you don't have the slightest thing that's going to go, oh, I want this. Well, you might want this to happen, but you're not going to make this happen.
Mm-hmm.
And let the players and their characters drive all the action. And that kind of the Apocalypse World powered by the Apocalypse system of when the player says something about what their character does, the GM always responds with, okay, then this happens. What do you do now? Or something along those lines. I think gives you a really good way to build up that constant surprise, constantly not knowing what's going to happen next for the whole group.
How do you handle, or how do you approach, or what's your thought on the situation of a keeper being caught flat-footed when a player says, well, I'm going to do X, and either it's just not something. I think there's sort of two versions of it. So one of them is somebody decides to do something that's sort of not in keeping with the genre. They do something that doesn't really feel like it's right for this game. It's too silly, it's too gruesome, it's too super powered, it's too whatever it is. And that's kind of a, like, do we need to have a conversation about what game we're playing right now kind of question. But the far more common example, which is the more, I think, fruitful one, is just, oh, I'm going to go talk to Mr. Smithers because he must know what's going on because he's been in the town all his life. And you're like, oh, I didn't even think about Mr. Smithers until you just mentioned him, right? Or until, like, he was just a name on a list somewhere until you said you wanted to go talk to him. So
how do you not have even been?
Right. Yeah. What's your thought on sort of preparing for players catching off guard?
Honestly, I feel like it's just practice.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's one of those things where if a player says, like in your example, oh, I'm going to go talk to the police chief, and I hadn't thought about the police chief, they're not in my notes. I've kind of done it enough now that I can come up with something. Maybe a name will be hard. Names don't get much easier, but the rest of it. So yeah, like for that kind of improvisation, I think practice is the key thing. There's some good guides to how to deal with it. Sean, you're going to have to remind me of the name. Is it Improv for Gamers? The one that that's a great source. Yeah. And there's also years and years ago, Graham Walmsley from the UK put out this book called Play Unsafe, which is just basically a list of techniques from improv theatre that as you can apply them to role playing, which I found a really great read too. So those are some kind of guides to how to think about improvising and games to practice it. But you can also just do it as you play. And I think, it's practice it. Don't like fear it, I think, is part of it. Because I think a lot of people find it terrifying because they're like, oh, what if I have to stop in the middle of play and think about it and to come up with the answer? But most groups don't mind if you stop for a few seconds to figure out something, that's fine. And so yeah, don't fear it, practice it, and you'll get there.
Yeah. I really love that last part you said. I think there's many times in my games when players are like, I'm gonna try this. I'm like, I wonder what's gonna happen when you do that. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Let me think on that for a second. I think it's
Yeah.
perfectly fine for the keeper or the GM to just be very open about saying like, well, let me think about what would happen and
Actually, one incredibly trivial tool that I find useful for that is when someone says something I completely don't have an idea for, just grab a die, roll it, and like whatever die it is, a low number is something bad for the players, high number is
Right.
something good for them. And like even that tiny little, is this bad, good, or middling, can help you prompt something.
give you enough structure to build off of. Yeah, absolutely.
I had something similar in a situation where my first series actually, they were having some sort of crocodile spirit things come out of a portal, solidify, whatever. Their sorceress was trying to hold it closed, and one of the other characters says, "What happens if I throw this idol they want through the portal?" My response was, "I don't know. Use magic and we'll find out." It did not go well.
Actually, but that's a great point, though. In the Powered by the Apocalypse system, like a lot of the moves that the hunters have access to can give you an answer to these questions.
Right.
If you can think, as Luke did, this could be that move. Roll that, we'll see what happens. That's another way to handle it.
Yeah. On my end, I tend to keep a framework of nothing is canon until it happens on screen. I have thoughts and minds of this is what I think is going on, but if something happens that, wait, I just suddenly got an idea, as long as it doesn't contradict something I said earlier on screen, then I'll just do it. I have a campaign right now where I'm using for inspiration for the Eldritch Horrors a certain series of books from the 30s to the 50s that I'm not going to name because my players might be watching.
Fair.
But we've already changed away. I've already determined those books are unreliable narrators. And in the same way, any of my, like you would say, a series Bible in terms of like a TV show is unreliable narrator because whatever happens in play will trump whatever's in my notes.
Yeah, I like that idea of having a lot of, I think daydreaming about games is really a fruitful exercise where you just kind of go, I wonder if this, what it would look like if they did this, or if this happens. But it's all just ideas you're floating around your head, and if they happen, they happen, and if they don't, that's fine. They might happen in another game. It's always there's always something fruitful out of just wondering at what happens in your games. All right, Marek, I'm gonna come back to you. We've been talking a lot about sort of high-level philosophy and approach, but Michael actually gave a few examples of some good texts, both Play Unsafe and Improv for Gamers, and there's I think quite a few other sort of best practices for jamming texts out there as well. But why don't we talk a little bit about your techniques and both in running in general, but also when it comes to sort of on-the-fly game design, aka custom moves, because that's what custom moves are. They're like, let's just do a tiny bit of game design right now, or for this session. What are some of your techniques for handling that?
First and foremost, I think that the more I run Monster of the Week, the less I actually tend to improvise new moves and new rules on the fly, simply because the more I run it, the more elastic I am becoming about the core rules, and I realize how much can you do about them. As for improvising and moment-to-moment gameplay, I think my rule number one is to create a ceaseless forward momentum, which can sometimes stop for moments of reflection or introspection or personal scenes, but generally the story has to move in some direction. So I always try to to introduce as much of the so-called failing forward in my games as possible. If everything goes great to the players, then great. if something doesn't go great, let it go fruitfully terribly, so to say.
Nice.
Yep.
And let it always open some new doors. On the other hand, I think that the longer I run Monster of the Week, the more ruthless I am about the consequences, and it actually makes my games better. I was raised mostly with Dungeons & Dragons and Savage Worlds, two games in which the characters can really become quite unplayable due to one bad decision or one bad roll when they are dying or they are wounded too hard or things like this.
Right.
While in Monster of the Week, the characters are sometimes kind of squishy, but also very resilient at the same time. And I'm very, very impressed by how Michael managed to combine vulnerability and resilience for Monster of the Week hunters. So the more I run the game, the less afraid I am to push them hard, especially at the beginning of the campaign. And finally, I realize that my campaigns are going far smoother when I am treating the first few games as a bit of an interview or a series of proposals, and I am introducing many threads, many NPCs, many subplots, not because I really want to play all of them, but because I want to give my players a huge palette of options to choose from, and then I am looking at what catches their fancy, and almost always someone or something I introduced quite accidentally becomes the favorite bystander or the favorite location or things like this. So I think that my overall plan for minute-to-minute gameplay is first spam them with everything I can to see what sticks, and then improvise from what sticks and see what will they do with those things which have stuck with their story.
Yeah, that sounds great. I want to ask a little bit more, to unpack a little more what something you said at the very beginning, which is having sort of ceaseless forward momentum, having there constantly being new challenges or threats or things going on, while leaving some room for reflection and thoughts. But what's your feeling so I found that in general, if players get a mixed result or a miss, then having complications ensue is just a natural byproduct of the moves. But also a hit, a 10 plus, even a crit, is still progressing things forward. We're always moving forward no matter what. But what's your kind of approach to keeping the threat level or the urgency up, even when players are succeeding, at sort of all of their goals? When they deal with one challenge, how do you keep that sort of forward momentum in terms of that sense of there's still a threat, there's still urgency, even when they've overcome the challenge at hand?
I think that Monster of the Week is a game about stories told under pressure. And it's an aspect of this game you just have to introduce for every single game for it to work. And Monster of the Week works best with active antagonists and active threats. And mysteries are usually structured so that the players can't just get to the main threat at once. And for example, them having a spectacular row of successes can mean that the bad guys are also accelerating their plans, which is like both a threat and an opportunity, because then quite possibly the confrontation will happen faster, but also the bad guys might be worse prepared. And that's also something that's also something which helps my games a lot. I treat success as a provocation. If the players are having many successes, they aren't clearing the field around them, but they are tempting the evil things that lurk in the darkness to step into the light sooner, which makes the drama bigger and makes the tension grow, but also gives the player an extra chance because, again, those bad guys probably won't be as well prepared as they would be if the player's action was going slower.
Mm-hmm. I like it. I like it.
Also,
sorry.
if I may add, sometimes when the players are having almost too good of a streak, I offer them a chance to gain something extra if they are willing to risk something extra. So, for example, let's say that the mystery is about a cabal of sorcerers, and if the players are acting against those sorcerers really fast and really successfully, then I might decide that the demon who is behind those sorcerers actually intervenes right now because they feel it's the best chance to squish those tiny mortals. And then the story becomes harder, but also the players can score a victory, which normally would happen only far further down the arc.
Nice. Sounds like a devil's bargain. Oh, wait, that's a different game.
Yeah.
But yes, I do very much like that. Oh, you succeeded. Do you want to see what's behind door number 2? You've done so well. You can get to the end of the story, or you can see what's really going on, which is terrifying sometimes.
Yeah. I think actually I've seen a lot of people who seem a bit worried that the hunters will do too well and solve a mystery quickly. And I think what Marek said is like the reason not to fear that is it just opens up more options for you if that happens. It's you don't have to think of it as, oh, I'd planned this like 4-hour puzzle and we finished it in 2 hours. It's like, okay, now what happens next? That's
right.
the cool bit.
I do like increasing the scope of the overall series when they succeed very well. Like introduce like, oh, you found they were getting letters from some mysterious other person from that was clearly manipulating their research and led to this thing.
Yeah. When you start pulling back the veil and start seeing the deeper secrets in there. One wonderful thing about Monster of the Week is if you're ever just totally like, oh no, it's 15 minutes in the game and the players just somehow solve the mystery and I don't know what happens next. I'm not sure what to do. There are so many mysteries that are in, Tomo mysteries or Kodak. We have so many mysteries that are just available right now that are pretty easy to drop to, they all have hooks and they're pretty easy to drop into. So that if you're ever just totally at a loss, we've got a bunch of options there too.
Also, on that note, steal an episode of Supernatural or Buffy and just change things around a little bit.
Or in my case, Phasmophobia and or the Ghost Hunt anime.
Right.
Any Monster of the Week show, basically, right?
Yeah. Something strange is happening. Yeah. No,
if you don't mind, I just realized I have one more important advice.
Please.
Games which work very well for the hunters are perfect for like heartwarming moments of consolation and rebuilding, because basically the Monster of the Week format assumes that something bad has happened already as the scenario starts. There's the first victim, the first tragedy, something like this. And sometimes when my hunters do really well, I am like pointing them at the bystanders and locations which were already damaged, and I am creating more room for scenes of helping them, maybe enlightening them. I think the games which went best at my tables were also those where hunters most often dared to tell some random bystanders about the supernatural. Because when they are in a better position against the current evil they are facing, then they are in a situation where they can like expand their circle a bit, maybe recruit a new ally, things like this. And sometimes when the hunters are doing so well that they are creating breathing room for themselves, it's just best to let them breathe in this room and let the world around them breathe alongside them.
I love that. I also think it changes the dynamic. I mean, so many role-playing games center around the notion that the players are in some ways the underdogs and they're always fighting, they're always punching up against powers that are above and beyond them. And when they do punch through that ceiling and they're suddenly, even if temporarily, in a position of power, now they have things like the bystander who didn't survive, that their family, and how do you square the fact that you lived but this other person didn't? How do you feel good about that, or what do you do to try and make anything, to make the world better when you are in the position of control or power, even if it's just for a moment? So I think that idea of letting them appreciate that success and the position it puts them in as fantastic. I also really love something you said earlier, Marek. You've crammed so many good things in that it's taking me a second to unpack them. But another thing that I love that you said earlier is really, at the longer you've played, the more comfortable you've gotten putting the characters in really terrible positions and having really terrible outcomes. And I think that does an enormous amount for making the players feel truly vindicated when they finally succeed. Yeah. And also it just goes to show you how incredibly clever players can be when you're like, here's this impossible situation, and they still have to figure a way to get through it.
Mm-hmm.
If I can add,
of course.
No, you go ahead, Marek.
All right, so I think I was kind of conditioned by some total party kills and other unfortunate end of sessions I've experienced in other games.
Yeah.
But when I really dove deep into Monster of the Week, and I realized it's the game meant to put players in desperate spots, and it's a game designed by Michael to make players really effective in desperate spots.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, I think it is a game about consequences. It's a pulpy game, but not necessarily a light-hearted pulpy game. I think that of course, you can do anything with Monster of the Week, but the default mood seems to be something like gritty pulp, let's say. Sure. So very, very high action, but also with real consequences. And I think that applying this really strong pressure allows the hunters to shine in both their pulpy awesomeness and also in their very, very human frailty and vulnerability. And when they show both, that they are kind of superheroes, but also kind of very, very human, then Monster of the Week shows its entire spectrum of possibilities.
I love that.
Yeah, I was going to say, kind of riffing on both what you and Sean just said, you can be quite harsh with the consequences in Monster of the Week because the hunters have so many tools to deal with them. Yeah. And you can, as an example, you could have a hunter fighting a troll, and you can say, if the situation's built this way, you could say, the troll's going to tear your head off.
Right.
As the consequence that they have to resist. And most games wouldn't let you do that because it's too much.
Right.
But in Monster of the Week, the hunters have plenty of tools to deal with that. They can fight back themselves. One of the other hunters might save them. There's a bunch of the basic moves that allow you to go, the troll's going to try and tear my head off. Nope, that's not going to happen.
Right.
And again, there might still be costs, and you might not succeed. So it's also a game where a hunter can just die, but it's unusual, right. Certainly early on.
Also, I would like to point out that there's the resurrection rules, which means if a hunter dies, you have a ready-made mystery for the next session.
True. Well, and there's, I think Marek was sort of hinting at this earlier, that there's, TPKs in general are not fun experiences for players, but Monster of the Week offers so many things that aren't death as a punishment. There's so many other, you owe a favor, you've been infected by some virus, you've got, there's so many ways in which characters can have their lives complicated that don't take away their agency, right? Where they're still able to play the character, they're still able to be effective, but now they have a new thing to temporarily or permanently, have to worry about.
Mm-hmm. So. By the way, those are the very nastiest moves I have ever designed. I have a few monsters in my mysteries which have moves working basically, if this monster would kill the hunter, eat instead XYZ. And those XYZ are things like total transformation or permanent curse or things like this. And it's also a way of dancing around player vulnerability, which appeals to me a lot, and generally the main character of a story is too precious a resource to just let them leave the story for good. But
Right.
complicating their place in the story, it's a different beast altogether.
that just signs you up for another season. Honestly, now we need to have the season of the show or the game. So Marek, one of the things you were talking about early with a Hunter's Journal was the idea of putting the agency in the hands of players, and we've been talking about this a lot throughout the whole conversation of giving players the ability to contribute. But I think that there's a natural reservation or fear that can sometimes happen where people are like, what can I add? How much can I say is happening here? Because clearly if you give everybody full authority, the game at some point it's just it turns from a structured game into just a conversation, and conversations are great, but that's not necessarily the game that we're playing. So there's a lot of authority and agency that players do have, but I don't think they necessarily always know how far they can go. Can I say anything that happens? Can I, what is it okay for me to say is true, and what do I need to check in about, or what do I need to ask? So I wonder what you all feel about getting players comfortable with that ability, that ability to add to the fiction and to change it, to add their spin to it.
Well, like one of the things is, going back to a little bit of the weird moves is some of my example here. I often get people take no limits as a thing, because I get a couple people who like the action movie thing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things that'll happen the first time they use no limits, one of the questions I will ask is, how superhuman do you want this?
Nice.
And it's like, do you want this like an 80s action TV show, or do you want this like Captain America holding down a helicopter? And so and they settle on where they want it, and then I just base the existence of that power based off what they want it to be. And in some cases, like, well, secretly, you're obviously, in my head, I went, secretly, you're obviously not human.
I'm sensing a theme here, Luke. I'm sensing a inhuman theme as part of your sort of your core design ethos.
Yeah, there's a part of me that realized after the fact in my early 40s that a lot of my game design and fiction writing is revolving around like spending most of my life not consciously aware that I was a neurodivergent and ace. So there's a lot of that struggling with the being other without understanding what it is that gets into my work. Yeah.
I think that's a super fruitful place for game design, is that sense of the monster and everything else in the game as metaphors, and I think that a lot of people will really love feeling seen by that content that you've put in that, Luke, because it's giving them a chance to like, that's what I haven't had the words for it before, but this is how I'm feeling. This is the kind of story I want to tell.
It's pretty much entirely the changeling.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, the number of people who have,
but sorry. Okay. I'm going to wrap up. The other thing is like the other things, like I had a player come up to me and ask for one of the 2 campaigns I'm play testing right now. Does cryosleep exist in this setting? I was like, well, do you want it to?
Yeah.
And another one, they kept coming up with me with things like, hey, I got this idea for this bit, like cult almost sacrificed her. Maybe it's bloodline related or whatever, and she got away. Now she's attached to this thing. And I'm looking at the novels that inspire this and going, But yeah, they're coming in. These are cases where they're already comfortable supplying me with information, obviously. Right. But I also like doing the question is, do you want it to be part of this? Basically. Yeah.
Nice. What about you, Michael? What's your approach to?
Well, I was going to say, some kind of techniques that I like to use to avoid that, like putting someone on the spot and saying, "What do you see?" and them not knowing what to do.
Right.
So first thing that is kind of easier as a writer is what we've got in the team playbooks and the hunter stories, where you've got lists of options. So it's like, pick your enemy. Is it this person, this person, this person? And like, it's a lot easier for people to contribute if they've kind of got a structure there.
Yeah.
And you can kind of do that in play by saying, you see something scary. Is it this or something else?
Oh, nice.
I mean, that's a bit more work to come up with those options, but if
Sure.
you can do that, it helps people. The other things I'd say for kind of getting group input, but without putting people on the spot, is you can ask the whole group, hey, does anyone have an idea for this? I'll actually usually do this with like locations. It's like someone says, okay, we need a place to discuss this. I say, oh, are you going to find a cafe or what? And let the group suggest where they're going to go and use that as the idea. And that also makes it not be on one person. And even if no one comes up with an idea, you've got a few more seconds to think of it yourself.
Right. As they're all it also feels like something that's very much that would be also in the control of the characters as well. So it makes sense to say, like, I mean, this isn't obviously like a big pivotal point, but like, where are you going to go? Like, where do we next find you when you're having this conversation? Is not just what the players think is a cool next scene, but it's also like, well, the hunters could probably get to a cafe or a library or a city hall or, you know, wherever they think the scene will be set, right? Like that feels very natural.
And one last one is to ask them not like what they see, but ask what's your character suspect or has heard about. Like, give them an opportunity to like input something that they're not having to decide the state of the world. They're just having to decide something their character may know or believe, or have heard, or which I think again, it's kind of lesser.
The unreliable narrator.
Yeah,
thing
exactly.
makes it a lot more comfortable.
Yeah. If you can say, well, I've heard that these monsters are from outer space. Yeah. That maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, but it doesn't make you feel like you have personally failed if you didn't know the answer, because this is just the rumor.
Exactly. And it just makes it feel like there's less weighing on it, right? You don't have to have the perfect answer if it's just a thing you believe. You know.
Right. Very good. So one of the rewards for the Hunter's Journal and Slayer's Advocate is the Investigator's Casebook. It is a journal where people are going to be able to fill in their they're going to be able to fill in all kinds of details about cases. It's very hunter focused, hunter facing, because obviously that's the focus of both of these books, is to be hunter facing. But I also, as a GM, I'm always journaling for my games, and I'm always keeping track of the games as they go, and also doing a lot of prep. And so I will always start a journal in any long-term game as I go, and I have a lot of things I want to kind of fill out within that. Doesn't have to be in a journal, obviously. It can be any format you want. But when you're starting a new game, what are the kind of things that Marek, you talked earlier about just like having having a ton of things to throw at them and see what sticks. What are some key things that you want to make sure you always have when you are starting a new game? Marek, why don't we start with you, because you had talked about it a little bit earlier.
Basically, I think that I am starting every new campaign with like some idea about everyone's needs for this campaign. And basically, those needs are usually for the players to experience a certain type of story for a certain playbook. And I am doing my best to keep the first few games really like question heavy, both in the story and outside of the story. So I am asking both about how the setting looks like, what details can the player fill in, and so on. But also I am asking out of character, what do the players need? Did it work? And so on. And on my side, my needs are usually simply a willingness to test out some new strange thing I am designing for Monster of the Week, because I also design a lot, maybe too much, and I'm afraid almost every single game I've run over the last few years has been more or less a playtest, even if sometimes those are playtests of some very vague ideas I might publish far further down the line.
We're always playtesting. I know. I totally know how you feel.
Mm-hmm. So basically, I am starting with what do I want to check out during this game and what kind of gameplay are my players interested in. And thankfully, ever since the codex came out, it often usually means choosing a team playbook as well, which
Nice.
does a ton of world building right at the start.
Yep.
Yeah.
So basically, usually at the start of a campaign, I have a written or memorized list of everyone's needs, which can be neatly created with the palette safety tool, and all the info from team playbook and or from the hunter stories, and usually a short list of mysteries, like 2 to 5 at most, I would love to test out during this campaign, and that's all. And like that's already too much, and and all the crazy stuff which happens, which we improvise and fail and have this eureka moment of new connections, is well enough for a typical 8 to 12 session campaign I am having. The last such campaign I have actually run for the people from Casa de Locos, so the publishing house which is doing the Czech edition of Monster of the Week.
Cool.
And we basically had probably 9 session campaign made out of 2 pre-made mysteries and their choice of escaped experiments by Luke as team playbook, and it worked really well, and the story was like crowded with content.
Love it. Crowded with content. That is a beautiful little nugget right there. How about you, Luke? What do you do when you're preparing to start a new campaign?
Well, we kind of start with the general overview of the broader genre tropes that we want to deal with. Like my first series, we decided we wanted something a little bit like XCOM. We ended up more Agents in Black, but we wanted like in XCOM but supernatural. But the first series still ended up more along the lines of Agents in Black instead of that. But yeah, we set up an agency that the players belong to and all that. The second one, we were adapting a Savage Worlds campaign, East Texas University, and we were playing with that. And we just said, well, there's this cool thing. I would like to run it in Monster of the Week. Would you guys be interested? And we went with there. And after I got base genre things, we go into session 0. I figure out what playbooks I'm dealing with, because each playbook's going to add to the world. And here are their specific backstories, and that becomes a world building thing. So my setting up a campaign is really, here's the general thing I'm thinking of, and then I wait for them to give me their ideas, and I start filling it out, and I have that, at least mentally, usually physically somewhere, that series Bible of these are some ideas that might come into this. And
a short aside, Luke, actually, I have learned how to make campaign journals thanks to your chapter on the journals in our new books, and I am very, very grateful for it. And my campaigns are far better ever since you've taught me to do it.
That's lovely to hear. Oh,
it is.
That's so good.
I have worked in several different ways to try to make myself reframe all the information that goes on during a session, and there are a lot of different things I found work, and I pretty much put a whole bunch of different ones in that article.
It's really good stuff. I love that. Very good. What about you, Michael? What's your approach when you're starting a new campaign?
It's pretty similar actually to both what Marek and Luke have done. I'm possibly even a little bit lighter. I tend to, if I'm going to start a new Monster of the Week season series, I'm going to come in probably with a idea about where it should be set and an idea about what sort of vibe I want for it. Like, is it going to be more supernatural or more Buffy or more Fringe or something like that, like, and then when people make their hunters and we get all the decisions that made there, like, that's when I'm going to actually start world building. And again, like Marek said, like the first few mysteries, you're finding stuff out more than anything else. And like, it's what happens in play is going to build up the world. So yeah, I don't really do much pre-play preparation for a new game. It's more in-play stuff. One thing I've been doing for the past few years, which I find really helpful, is similar to the journaling, but I actually write a log of every role-playing session afterwards. I've got a journal which I just basically write down what happened in the session, whether I played or GM'd, whatever. But
I'm right there with you. I love my AP reports. I write them for all my games.
Just thinking about it just after the game and writing it down so that you can then go back and refer to it if you need to is super useful for that sort of thing. I love having a record for the next session, but I also love having it for 5 years later when you're like, what did we do? And you've got that no, and I've even used it for, I had a really long running campaign of the One Ring where we did the Darkening of Mirkwood campaign, which took years and years. So to be able to go back and say, oh, what did these characters do 15 years ago in the game?
Right.
Was fantastic.
That's awesome. How long have you been keeping your journals for your post game journals?
I can see the first one over on the shelf there, and it's dated 2017. So
2017, nice.
Yeah, I'm just reaching the towards the end of the second volume at the moment.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about how to start campaigns. Another good question is how to end them. I think that, a lot of times in any role-playing game, there can be some pressure to have the final episode tie everything up or create this really climactic end to everything. And I feel like that could be a lot of pressure on not just the GM, but also the players to like feel like they've got everything buttoned up. What constitutes for you a satisfying story? Because I don't think it always has to be, every question has been answered, but people do definitely want to feel like the main issues have been resolved. Marek, what goes into a good ending for you?
I would like to introduce you all to the thought and ingenuity of a designer named Michael Sands, who in his Monster of the Week game has introduced the idea of an arc. And I think that all of my series have ended with arcs. Basically, this process of like throwing random stuff at players is complete when an arc coalesces out of it. Mm-hmm. And it usually does after a few games. And then I start gently steering the game toward a predetermined finale, like maybe not predetermined finale, but towards, let's say, I am deciding what the main threat is, and I am letting this threat escalate. So, for example, one of my... Please do.
I was going to say, you don't think of it as a predetermined finale, but that the finale will be whatever resolves this thing, right? Is that what you're getting at?
Yes, exactly. Yes, like it's predetermined in a way that I know what questions do I need to have answered to finish the story, but not how will we answer them. And basically, it usually turns out that one of the threats or villains or monsters from the early campaign, from the early mysteries, is more compelling than the others. Mm-hmm. And one of my most random campaigns, just after the first few games, we all realized it's kind of about the Greek mythology. And in one of the early mysteries, the god Apollo was the villain. So basically, I decided that he is the mastermind behind everything. And the remaining few mysteries were basically a hunt where the hunters were closing in on Apollo. And that's more or less how I do it. I first see what things from the early sessions stay with the players. and then I am thinking if I am able to create some large thread out of it, but also how large should this thread be is very, very context dependent. I like the risk of a real total apocalypse and the world ending, but also I sometimes like more down to earth stories.
Yeah.
And for example, when I was playtesting Gothic Century is very strongly focused around cities, and so when I had some threat which could really endanger the entire city around the hunters, then I knew I have my end of season finale brewing.
Right. In a setting like Gothic Century, the city is effectively the world. I mean, that's the highest stakes that there really are. So that's a lovely way to capture it. What about you, Luke? Do you have any approach when you're wrapping a game up or looking to wrap it up?
Pretty similar. I generally have like a behind the scenes nemesis going on. And if they get to the point where, and sometimes I don't have that from the beginning, I invent it in the middle of the game. I'll do a couple episodic ones and they'll come up with a nemesis in the middle of it. Sometimes I have it from the beginning. But if I get to an arc where I leave them breadcrumbs of the person behind everything, and if they get to a point where they shut down that person and the next, if we proceed, it's going to be a very different flavored campaign, that feels like it is a good point to end that campaign. I do like it if there are some remaining breadcrumbs still to, like when we ended the playtest campaign for Slayer Survival Kit and Hunter's Journal, the mundane, who is now the expert, still has a red cap pursuing them for their heart. Let's see here. There is still some other stuff going on with the actually I think most of the others resolved their hunter stories, but they are still the question of why is it none of the ghosts in this, anybody who dies in this town becomes a ghost. Nobody goes to heaven. It's just this town for about 5 miles out from town. Why? That was not answered, and a couple other things. There's a couple of villains that got us that escaped, small scale ones that they might want to track down later. That gives me one shots to do with those characters later if we need to.
Yeah. No, that's delightful. It seems like there's a common thread here, which is start throwing a bunch of things out there, see kind of what sticks, what players are most invested in, and then ride that till its natural conclusion. Ride that until it's the thing that till you get to a satisfying answer to those questions of what happens next.
It might be worth saying out loud that even like what the final threat is can be decided wholly by players' interest. Like if one of the villains is most impressive or most infuriating for them or something like this, they can become the main villain of the story. And for example, sometimes I was actually surprised by like the hierarchy of threats my players were creating. Those campaign for Casa de Locos had an actual dragon for the final threat, the mastermind behind it all. And this creature was the main threat simply because the players reacted far more strongly to me introducing a dragon into the campaign, like for them to escalate from the relatively human-sized horror monsters to a big damn fantasy monster was quite something. So like they made the dragon the main villain by assuming that they must be the main villain. And if my players are assuming something and it's quite logical in the setting, then who am I to say no?
Quite similar back to the playtest. The main villain ended up being the mother of one character, somebody who manipulated the creation of another, somebody who had to deal with the demon that I was like, okay, so she's getting people possessed by demons because she has worked it out that she can possess those demons. And this lets her body hop immortality, and she's trying to become a god. And she had a personal connection to all the characters. And This came out basically at the middle of about the 5th session or so, when the demon failed to pass life roll and got temporarily taken over by her, and she started to reach for the celebrity. and it just continued going on. It was like, well, I need a nemesis, and they're all curious about their mother or this person. So Jocasta. So Jocasta's the nemesis now.
Yeah. Well, the point you made about they all had a personal connection, I think, is a huge one. That personal connection is the thing that someone's going to invest in much more than they will any mustache twirling or any horror, apocalyptic horrors. It's you've wronged me, you lied to me, you betrayed me, you manipulated me, etc. You've personally affected me. Michael, you have any techniques that you like for wrapping things up?
Same kind of thing as Marek and Luke, like when an arc develops and you resolve it, that's a good place. I was going to say that you can also look like from the hunter side too, though, because if you've got hunters who are like running out of luck or running out of improvements to take, or maybe some of them are retiring, that can also be a pointer that, the story's coming to its close, and you can tie it up, perhaps not with a big arc finale, but just with the kind of hunters reaching the end of their career. That'll probably be even more the case once people start using hunter stories, because they're another way to give your hunters their own arc, and where you can say, I think this person's story's finished now, and that can also point you to a satisfying ending to a game. And one last point is that you don't have to just stop a Monster of the Week game. I think Marek or Luke mentioned something about next season, because you can copy the shows and go have a big finale, pause for a bit, and maybe we'll come back and have another season in a month or two, or next year.
Yeah, leaving that door open, I think, is smart.
What I'm playing in right now, I get to be a player. We had a time skip from 1990 to 2000, and completely different team playbook. So yeah.
I dig it. Marek, I think you raised a hand a second ago.
Yes. I want to just one short remark. The most perfect situation for me as a keeper is when I realize I can create an arc which will be a good finale of a season entirely out of hunter stories.
Oh yeah. Jeff's kiss. That's perfect. That's awesome. All right, I think we're getting down to it. We got our last couple of questions here, which is thank you all for sharing all these insights. This is something I feel like we've been sort of teasing at for a little bit. We've been talking about the mundane does not mean human, and monster does not mean villain. Starting with you, Luke, because you sort of mentioned this earlier in terms of personal identity and sorting all that out. Are monsters always the bad guys in Monster of the Week? I think that's no, but I still love your thoughts about it. But more importantly, how do you incorporate non-human folks as just folks? What makes somebody a person, and what makes somebody a protagonist of a story versus a villain or an antagonist?
Okay, so gameplay wise, if I use the term monster, if I call somebody a monster, they're going to be very implacable. They're going to be very set on this objective. They're not going to listen to people with other ideas. So they are going to be the antagonizing force, even if they might have a point. And before I knew villain was going to be a thing, I was writing an article on how to make humans into a credible main threat and how to adapt monster and conspiracy to that. But anyway, as to how do I incorporate it and what makes a person is generally just how they interact as a society, whether they compromise, whether they work with people. One of my main fictional settings is Divine Blood, where the vast majority of supernaturals are civilians. There is one of the examples that is from one of my one shots in that setting that I run in Fate. There is a demon who is just a baker. She's around 200 years old. She's never been in any danger whatsoever in her life. She's just a baker. She would probably be less dangerous than a random human with a mugger with a knife.
Yeah. The TV show Grimm is a great example of that, where a lot of the supernatural creatures are just regular people living their lives. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They may have powers, but they've never contextualized them for use in a crisis. So,
or for evil in particular.
Right. Yeah, a bird can fly, and flying is an incredible ability that we do not have, but it is not a weapon or anything like that. That's just how a bird gets around. Yeah, I think I love that idea that they have powers, but they're not weapons.
And just think about with us the number of capabilities we have that we don't develop into over time, that because we have no interest or it doesn't serve our daily life.
Yeah.
And similar thing like a werewolf. Hey, I can turn into a wolf. I use that to go running around the woods on Thursdays. And that's about all I do with it.
I love the views from way up high when I run up that mountain. Yeah. I'm thinking of those scenes in Men in Black, those sort of throwaway scenes where they have the various like aliens that are hanging out inside the base, and they're just like making coffee and shooting the butt. They're just BSing with one another, and they're there just sort of as set pieces to make it feel weird. But it's also like, no, of course there would just be aliens just talking around the water cooler as well, right? Like every creature will have a society and have connections with one another.
Yeah. So as soon as you lose that and just get somebody who is, this is the way I am going to do things, and I don't care about what else is in the way, that's where it becomes a bad guy.
Yeah. Nice. Awesome. All right. I've got my final question for you all, which is a bit of an open-ended one and sending us all off to talk about what we're excited about. What might be coming next for Monsters of the Week, and also what might be coming next for you personally outside of it? We all run and play lots of games. We all have lots of other interests. So what's going on with you, Marek? What are you thinking? I feel like the moment Codex of Worlds ended, you started on Hunter's Journal. So now I'm wondering, is there some cut material that's already going into something else, or do you have other projects you're working on?
Well, we three keep brainstorming what else could be done for Monster of the Week, and we already have some ideas, and I assume that, Sean, you already know about some of them. However, we also don't want to oversaturate ourselves or Evil Hat with new big pitches. Sure. So for now, I am working on smaller projects. And what's coming next for Monster of the Week? Well, this small booklet here, the Advent Calendar for Monster of the Week, which I prepared. Yes, I prepared it in PDF for the last December, and now it's in print on demand, and it will be available in print on demand on drive-thru quite soon, so that you can all print it before next December. And also, soon after finishing the Hunter's Journal and Slayer Survival Kit, I drafted like dozens of mysteries, which I then playtested with various people, and I hope to publish them sooner or later, whether with Evil Hat or independently. I must say, I think I got a bit oversaturated with Monster of the Week after Hunter's Journal, and I ran some other games, and in particular, I started running very, very intimate one-on-one Call of Cthulhu scenarios, because they are still horror, but they felt very, very different than Monster of the Week. And now I am thinking if I could adapt experiences from those into one-on-one Monster of the Week, because I feel that there is like a growing appreciation and market for games for smaller number of people. Absolutely. And even one-on-one games and solo games. So that's also something I will be considering in the future.
Yep. One-on-one games are so wonderfully intimate in that it's just the conversation back and forth between two people, and they're always just about this. They're always so laser focused in. I've played several one-person games, and they've been really fantastic. And I know a lot of people are really excited about solo games as well. So that all sounds delightful.
And because even when I design role-playing games, I still design them mostly on my laptop, and I am a bit tired with working digitally only. I've had a crazy idea to start designing handwritten games. And
Nice.
those are in Polish, so you probably won't be able to read them. But I'm having great fun at designing them. First, they were present for my students. Then I dared to show them publicly at a convention in Cranfield, UK, last month. And I am having so much fun with them that actually I think I won't be able to design them as much as I want if I keep doing it only as presents. So I am slowly scouting the possibility of actually creating them as paid products, but we'll see how it works. But anyway, Sean, you might be interested to know that while working on those fully handwritten, handcrafted games, I also started drafting a guide for using scrapbooking and various crafts as helps for stupid games. So that's also something I have in my pipeline.
Oh, wow.
Cool.
Well, that's fantastic. You're speaking my language, Marek. That's very exciting. How about you, Luke? What's next on horizon for you?
Okay, I am currently playtesting a couple things. One of those is related to the thing we've been brainstorming together. The other one is a long-standing thought of mine of like found footage as a thing. And my original idea for it was just going to be kind of stapled onto an existing campaign. Players would find records of other adventures and they would do a one shot if they wanted to. That wasn't really gelling. And after it came to mind that it would work better as a setting framework where that was the premise. So the idea is we'll have some people. This is kind of like Fear Street. I was watching Fear Street and it gelled, and played Eternal Darkness, same sort of thing. So you'll have some people in the present running some adventures to try to figure out, piece together what's going on. And every once in a while, they would flash back to probably a wait, monsters are real scenario and see how a bunch of people just got obliterated. Every once in a while, a past hunter event. It's like that. And be very upfront with some of the monsters you run across, you won't be able to find weaknesses for until you read up on them and do a one shot or something like that.
Nice.
And we are in our second mystery that wasn't the initial wait, monsters are real thing that spawned it. And after this, we're going to go back to 1969 or so and get like a very early camcorder recordings of an expedition out into the Atlantic.
Cool.
That sounds wow. I love it. Found footage. That's a great medium. That's fantastic. What do you got, Marek?
I just wanted to say that, like, ever since I started working with Luke, I am amazed and impressed by how can he twist and develop and expand Monster of the Week. Like, it is a very elastic game overall, but like basically you hear of a new way to use Monster of the Week from Luke, then you wait for 1d6 days, and then an even newer way of playing Monster of the Week already is being designed by Luke. So yeah, like Luke.
To be fair,
this, we are all
sitting around for several years and it wasn't working. So
I'm glad this last one has, and it seems like there's a lot more that are going to keep coming from it. That's fantastic. How about you, Michael? What's new on what's
I'll tease a bit more about the upcoming Monster of the Week thing we've been talking about. So basically, we were thinking about pushing the science fiction angle a bit further and doing a kind of Monster of the Week in space kind of supplement. I don't think that'll be that soon because we've got quite a lot to do. But the idea will probably be we'll have a few different settings that are different kind of science fiction-y Monster of the Week settings that you can pick from, and a bunch of how to make it much more about science fiction and technology and that sort of issue. So that's the kind of thing we're vaguely thinking about and playtesting, and it'll probably happen sometime, but I don't know how
soon. As a project manager for Evil Hat, and I've been doing this for over a decade now, my firm estimate on game design time is it takes as long as it takes to design. That is how long games take to design. Sometimes they're very quick, and sometimes they are many years, and that's the design time.
Yeah, that's how it is.
I can estimate editing or art or layout or any of those things. Game design takes as long as it takes. Fantastic.
Let's see. I've got a few other things. I'm vaguely thinking about copying John Harper and to an extent the Bakers with Burnt Over, John Harper's Deep Cuts thing, where he kind of got a like mini new edition kind of thing for Blades in the Dark, and doing like a bit of an update to how the Monster of the Week core rules work.
Sure.
But that's at the very vague thoughts. And it's partly because I presume this is what John was thinking too. He doesn't want to just like make a new edition and have everyone throw their old books away, because I don't really want to do that for Monster of the Week either. But I think there are some things that we could update and streamline that are in the core book, and maybe that's the way to do it. So that's another thing I'm vaguely thinking about, but hasn't gone any further. And the thing I'm really working on at the moment,
the real
my time into, is Glorious, which is a game that I've been. This is one of those game designs that I've been working on this for over 20 years.
Wow.
This is Napoleonic naval adventure stories, so like Patrick O'Brien's Aubrey and Maturin books or Forrester's Hornblower stories. So you're members of the Royal Navy during the French Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars on a sailing ship. And it's very much about the themes of how these people in this very constrained and dangerous situation deal with it, and how do they develop and cope with what they come up against. So that is the one that I'm kind of actively writing and playtesting right now, which is coming along quite well after so many years.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes a long time before an idea breaks free, and you know, you have to put things.
I think it took me a long time to figure out what the game was actually going to be about. That's the key thing.
Sorry.
No, I was just saying, I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, other than that, the Monster of the Week stuff, I have finally started putting some of my first drafts of some fiction I've had around for a while, and say, here, you can see it on Scribble Hub, and maybe I'll get enough money to buy an editor for it and put it out for a finished polished thing on sale on itch.io. But the first draft will always be here.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Well, speaking of putting on an itch and Scribble Hub, Luke and everyone else, where can folks find you if they want to follow up more? Where do folks find you on the internets? Where do we find you
first?
Yeah.
If you can find me pretty much anywhere, Drive Through, Itch, Blue Sky, YouTube, by looking for Thriftland, THRYTHLIND. You'll find it in quotes in Hunter's Journal's credits section, I think.
There you go. Yep.
And that is the name I've gone by for 30 years. So I've just held to it because nobody else uses it. So it's useful to me.
Nice. Yep. How about you, Marek? Where do people find you?
I'm not really all that present on social media, but if you type my full name and surname, Marek Golonka, into Drive-Thru RPG, you will see everything I've designed for various publishers.
Nice.
And my only own project big enough to have an online presence is the series of Call of Cthulhu things I am co-writing and co-editing called Zgrozy, which is simply Polish for horrors or terrors. But our English friends have convinced me to keep this name in English because it sounds very, very unpronounceable, and that's very Lovecraftian.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
I won't torment you with the pronunciation, but I will link to the Zgrozy Facebook page on YouTube as well. And that's all for now. I plan to be more visible online with my various projects. And when I'm ready to have like an umbrella presence for everything, I'm going to be active under the pseudonym Play to Care, because like it's my third alternative to Play to Win and Play to Lose.
Right.
But for now, Marek Golonka at Drive-Thru or Zgrozy on Facebook, and that's all.
Sounds good. That sounds cool. Yeah. How about you, Michael?
Okay. I'm on Mastodon and Blue Sky as Generic Games NZ on Mastodon on the Dice Camp server. And while I was just checking that, I saw someone had just posted a picture on Blue Sky of getting their Hunter's Journal and Slayer's Survival Kit.
Wow.
So that's cool.
Awesome.
more generally, you can find my website, genericgames.co.nz, which has got all my projects on it and links to where to get them. And obviously on the Evil Hat website for Monster of the Week stuff. That's where all that is based.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all. This has been an absolute delight. It was great hearing about both your approach to Monster of the Week, but also just your thoughts of best gaming practices. And I hope everyone watching had a great design. Luke, you've got a final thought?
Coincidentally, I just looked and saw the post that Michael's talking about.
Yeah.
That is from Maya Dutch and Wander of the Monsters Playbook
Oh, cool.
podcast, and I'm actually wearing one of her characters on my chest right now.
Oh my god! What a small world! What a small world! Awesome! I love it.
Well, it's not that surprising that it's a small world of people who are really into Monster of the Week.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know. It's the fan base is definitely growing, and a lot of people are discovering it, and it's I'm so happy when anyone does. All right, friends, thank you so much for your time. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll do another Dice Camp when we have another opportunity to. So we look forward to that as well. Take care, all.
Bye.
Cool.